pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to Nerf Secrets Revealed. Once again, you should check up on parts 1 and 2, especially if you're wanting to find out about what have I already done based on naming blasters, renaming them, for the most part. And I'm simply put just giving you quick overviews about some of these blasters in general. But picking up from where I left off last time, I've already talked about the VTX Vortex blasters as well as the Re-Vortex blasters, which are re-released variants of certain Vortex blasters from the original Vortex lineup that have been given certain paint jobs in them. That was one unique thing that I pretty much highlighted about it, but anyways, moving on from that, I'm going to talk about the Battle Camo series really quickly. It's essentially just a camouflage design of the Elite series itself, with combination of several different blasters in it. And of course they also came with their own certain style of Battle Camo based darts. But anyways, if there's blasters in the Battle Camo series that we currently got right now, then it would include reskin variants of the Fire Strike, Rough Cut, Battle Scout, and Strife, as well as the Split Strike. Now, of course, you might be just wondering, why on earth would I want to rename those? Well, it's simple. We already have a Rough Cut, Fire Strike, Battle Scout, Split Strike, and Strife in general. We already have those. We already have them named like that. So why would you want to name them the same exact thing, even if they're something completely different? And I mean, of course, they're just reskin variants. They're simply put just the same old carbon copies of these blasters, but that changes nothing, especially for me. So anyways, I'm just simply going to talk about the Battle Camo series itself. I'm going to start off with the Fire Strike, which I simply call it the Char Shot, because after all, Fire Strike based blasters out there, I've pretty much been giving names that are akin to Fire Strike. The XD version of the Fire Strike I've called the Inferno, and so the Battle Camo version I'm simply giving a more synonymous sort of term that's relative to fire and flames. So I simply call it the Fire Strike from the Battle Camo series the Char Shot. As for the Battle Camo Rough Cut, Battle Scout, Strife, Split Strike, I'm simply calling the Rough Cut the Maximizer, the Battle Camo Battle Scout the Combiner, because it's one of those Battle Camo blasters that has multiple attachments for it. The Strife also does this as well, but I simply call it the Helix Shot. And as for the Split Strike, well, just like with the Re-Diatron, which is simply a reskin variant of the Vortex Diatron, I haven't really come up with much based on the naming for Split Strike. Although, maybe in part 4, which I'll simply conclude about all of this in general. Once I'm done with all this, that is, I'll see what I can come up with. But for now, I'm just simply going to move on to some other blasters here. There's a Mega Blaster in there that's simply called the Talon. And I should simply imply really quickly that why it's being featured on here is that because there's an AccuStrike series blaster, which is simply put a reskin of the Zombie Strike Side Strike, and it's called the Talon Strike. The AccuStrike Talon Strike is basically just that. A Side Strike reskin, but at least it has a different name on it, so I'm not really gonna put my gripes on it that badly, but I suppose that Talon and Talon Strike, it's kind of the same level of issues that I have that's very akin to what I've already talked about based on the Ravenfire and AccuTrooper. Of course, I've already given them different names. I've given the AccuTrooper Zulu Cavalier, and I've given a new name to the Ravenfire, which is simply called the Fusionator. So, essentially, I pretty much dealt with those, but again, slightly solving the problem doesn't do anything better. By simply adding another prefix or suffix to the name that has already been taken, it doesn't do anything. Especially if it's for a blaster that happens to be a complete total reskin, a complete and total upgrade over a predecessor of it. So essentially, the Mega Talon, it's kind of similar in appearance to the Big Shock, which is also a Mega Blaster, by the way. It's Mega's version of the Elite Jolt, Zombie Strike Blitz, Elite XD, well, Blazer, and whatnot. There are plenty of other Jolts that I can probably talk about soon enough, but for now, I'll simply imply really quickly that the Talon, I'm just simply gonna have that renamed because Talon Strike. I feel like that even though with that in mind, Talon Strike and Talon, that I really don't want to risk any confusion, and neither would anyone else. So, of course, that's why I'm naming it the Taroth, which is simply put relative to the plant called taro. And yeah, a poisonous sort of plant called the taro. It's just that, really. So the Taroth, I'm simply but just adding a little hip to it. That's basically just what that is. The Mega Talon, I'm calling it the Mega Taroth. And what I'm going to do really quickly is that I've already highlighted about the specific Alpha Strike blasters that I've already given some names to because of the fact that Hasbro has decided to move on from zoology-based things to more traditional things that Elite blasters would have had names for. But aside from the so-called Hammer Storm, Uppercut, and Flight, which I've already renamed the Harpy, Fossa, and Uinta, there's actually an Alpha Strike blaster from the start called the Stinger. And I should really quickly imply that Stinger has also been taken. Another 2011 Dart Tag blaster has that name in it. Just like with what I talked about the Dart Tag 2011 Snapfire, there's also a Dart Tag 2011 blaster that's called the Stinger. It's basically another Jolt variation with some dart storage on top. And there's actually been a more recent version of this blaster called the Nanofire, which does come in a few different colors as well, just like with what the Dart Tag 2011 Stinger had. But in terms of the Alpha Strike Stinger, that name ain't going there. Instead, I'm calling it the Spinneret, which is relative to what a spider has. So that's basically what that is. I'm still keeping up with the zoology-based things for Alpha Strike in terms of naming, and mythological-based names for Rivals blasters. And I'll talk more about that kind of subject later on, because there's yet another problem that I have just come across recently, and it is despicable. But anyways, I am still not done with this here. There's a couple of Modulus blasters here that I should talk about really quickly. As you know, there's also a Modulus reskin of the Demolisher and a Modulus-based reskin of the Long Strike. But trust me or not on this, the Modulus lineup has those with different accessories and the such, but they don't have new names. I mean, for real. Are you freaking kidding me? The Modulus Demolisher and Modulus Long Strike. We already have those. Demolisher and Long Strike are already part of Nerf's lineup. And let me just point out really quickly, I've given them new names already, so I'll just read them off for you right now. The Modulus Demolisher, I'm calling it the Pulverizer, because that's what it is. It's very similar to that. Demolisher and Pulverizer. How could you go wrong with that? And as for Modulus Long Strike, I'm simply going to call it the Extendor. E-X-T-E-N-D-O-R. It's very akin to the Transformers lineup, where there's a character called Menasor. So it's not like I'm going to pronounce it as Extendor. I mean, that wouldn't really do much. So I'm just calling it the Extendor. The Modulus Long Strike is going to be called the Extendor, and the Modulus Demolisher, I'm calling it the Pulverizer. So that's the bottom line. Now, really quickly, there's a Rebel Blaster as well that happens to pretty much have a symbol name on it that has actually been taken right now. There's a Rebel blaster out there that's called the Trilogy. And I don't know about you, but there has actually been a blaster in the Elite lineup that's also called the Trilogy. And that Trilogy came out last fall, but the Rebel Trilogy came out way before then. At this point, I'm pretty much willing to say that Elite can take the name Trilogy. And Rebel cannot keep the name Trilogy. Even though the Rebel Trilogy came out first, it's safe for me to say that the name Trilogy simply defines that there's 3 to something. And being that the Elite Trilogy is simply put a shotgun with shells that could fire 3 darts at a time, that's what makes it a lot more fitting to have the name Trilogy for it. And in conclusion, that's basically what it is. The Elite Trilogy can fire 3 darts, while the Rebel Trilogy doesn't really do much for it. But anyways, I should also really quickly imply that if you don't recall from part 2 of this episode, there was a Rivals Blaster that has been called the Knockout. That's something I probably should have implied, but now I might as well talk about it. There's actually another Rebel Blaster out there that's also called the Knockout. It's basically the Rebel's version of the Elite Jolt. And there's definitely been a lot of Jolt-based blasters out there lately, just to try to keep up in tune with what the smallest size blasters out there could be. But anyways, that's basically what that is. The Rebel Knockout Blaster is the Rebel Knockout Blaster, and the Rivals Knockout Blaster is called the Oniros. And I've already talked about some of the other Rivals Blasters that had different names put onto them for a good reason. So you can check out part 2 of this episode if you haven't already, just to be sure of that. And anyways, now I'm going to move on to some other blasters out here. There's basically some blasters that actually come with other blasters, and if you're not familiar with the Mediator XL or the Scavenger, then well, let me talk about it. The Mediator comes with an attachment kit that includes a stock and has a double strike based reskin inside of it. A small double barrel blaster with hammer action that's basically a Zombie Strike double strike reskin is included in that pack. But as such, it actually doesn't really have a name for it. That's something I find really surprising. If they were to call it double strike, then well, they probably would have said something about it, but no. It's just simply known as the Mediator stock. Now the stock itself could be called the Mediator stock, but as for the blaster itself, I'm not calling it the Mediator stock blaster. I'm simply calling it the Modulus Opposer. Yeah, just had to look through the list just to find it. It was kind of obscured because, as you know, the Opposer is just a sidearm to the Mediator itself. And I should also mention really quickly that there's also a shotgun barrel for the Mediator itself. When combined with these 2 other attachments, that forms the Mediator XL. The shotgun barrel plus a stock with a hidden double strike reskin forms the Mediator XL. But I'm going to talk about the shotgun barrel really quickly because it basically counts as its own blaster because it actually has pump action on it to help build air into an air bladder, and then when you press on a button on the side, it can fire all 3 darts at the same time, just like the Elite Trilogy. And the fact that the barrel of it, which is essentially a gray piece on the top, can actually form to become the grip of the blaster itself. All you have to do is to fold it back upwards and then remove the barrel from the blaster itself. And that becomes its own blaster. So as for the Mediator shotgun barrel that can help form part of the Mediator XL, I'm simply going to call it the Standoff. Yeah, that's right. The Modulus Standoff. As an attachment for that blaster, basically. And now I'm going to move on to another Modulus blaster out there. The Tri-Strike. Yeah, the Tri-Strike. If you're not familiar with the Super Soaker lineup from 2014, during that year, there was a crossbow-based blaster out there called the Tri-Strike. What kind of gripes do I have about the Modulus version? Well, obviously the name! Yeah. I do not want to argue with the logistics of how Hasbro's executives and the like happen to work on this stuff. But anyways, I'm just simply going to point out that there's a core blaster to it, so it kind of works in the same way as the Mediator, or could I just say the Mediator XL works in the same way as the Tri-Strike does. But really quickly, I'm just going to point out that I have a replacement name for it. Novatron. Yep, Novatron. The modulus Novatron, essentially, has two attachments to it to create a Novatron XL, but I'm not really going to call it a Novatron XL, because Mediator XL is pretty much a namesake that I'm just going to give to the Mediator, and as for Novatron, I'm just simply calling it the Novatron Supreme. Because with all three combined attachments to it, the core blaster, a stock attachment, and a barrel attachment, it forms the Novatron Supreme, basically. Again, a little reference to Transformers Omega Supreme. So anyways, the Novatron is basically the same thing as the Mediator itself. It has two different attachments to it, a barrel and a stock. But yet they also function like their own blasters. There's a shotgun barrel on the front, which uses a pump action, which works in the same way as the Elite Demolisher or the Modulus Pulverizer or any other type of missile launcher, but instead of missiles, it launches mega darts. Although the stock attachment is a missile launcher, it can actually attach to the top of the Novatron itself, but it can also connect to the stock attachment adapter itself, and it can form its own blaster that way. So in a sense, to that, I'm just simply gonna have the parts themselves named just like that. The Tri-Strike, I kind of fumbled up there. The Novatron Barrel, Novatron Stock. That's basically what they would traditionally be called, but I'm not gonna call them those. Instead, I'm gonna call the Mega Dart Novatron Barrel the Novatron's Thrasher. The Novatron Mega Dart Barrel, I'm going to call it the Rundown, whereas Thrasher was a name that I originally intended to give to the missile launcher attachment for the stock attachment piece, and basically that's what it is. The stock attachment for the Novatron itself is a missile launcher. Thrasher originally came to mind when it came to naming that, but now I'm basically calling it the Crash Course. So essentially, the Novatron Supreme comes with the Novatron itself, which is the core blaster. Then there's the Mega Dart Blaster Barrel, which I'm going to be calling it the Rundown. And then there's the stock attachment, which doubles as a missile launcher, and it can also combine itself to form the missile launcher on its own if you wanted to. I'm calling it the Crash Course. Yep. Crash Course. So that's basically a summarization of the Novatron Supreme and the Mediator XL. But really quickly, I'm once again going to point out to the Scavenger, because it also comes with its own Jolt style blaster itself, which also doesn't even have a name to it. I'm pretty surprised. The Mediator stock pistol and shotgun barrel, plus the Novatron's Mega Dart Barrel and missile launcher stock attachment, they didn't even have names in them. For Scavenger though, the blaster itself, the small one that's a Jolt reskin, has a double barrel design to it, which the barrels are stacked on top of each other. It also doesn't even have a name. But that's essentially why I'm going to call it the Quarter. C-O-R-R-T-E-R. That's basically what that's going to be known as, essentially. Although, if there's one last thing on this list that I'm definitely going to talk about right now, it would be the Elite XD Delta Trooper. Again, it's as if Hasbro has no idea what they're doing. It's as if the people who produced the trademarks for them, or at least gained the rights to be able to name their blasters in certain ways, they don't even try to think of anything new. They don't even have the creative input that they should have had a long time ago. Instead, they just partially correct the problem, but it still adds on to a lot of frustration and somewhat confusion, especially for me, because I'm still confused at this point why there are so many blasters out there to begin with that have namesakes that have already been taken. But yet, here comes the Delta Trooper. It looks nothing like the Alpha Trooper, but wow, it sure is trying to be kind of like the Recon in a way, and that's basically what it is. It's just a Recon reskin. Looks totally different though, but it still does include a barrel and stock attachment just like the original Recon did, and the Retaliator, and the Avalanche, which is basically the XD version of the Retaliator, the white one. So basically, the Delta Trooper, I'm actually just going to go in the same line as the format of naming that I've done with the other Alpha Troopers. So technically, it's a 5th Alpha Trooper related blaster. There's the Alpha Trooper, Tango Renegade, Beta Commander, Zulu Cavalier, and now there's the Delta Trooper. Which, right down here, at the bottom of the very list right here, I'm calling it the Sierra Major. Yeah. So, that right there is the complete list that I currently have based on all blasters that I've discovered so far, with namesakes of all sorts that have already been trademarked amongst all lineups of all sorts that have existed over the last decade or so. But still, I got lots more to talk about based on this problem and this topic itself, so please be sure to stick around for the conclusion of this really long episode itself. And I will apologize that if there hasn't been a lot of other stuff in my mind, but that's only because I only wanted to get this stuff out of the way firsthand. There's certainly been a lot of other things out there that I want to talk about based on Nerf itself before I'm all done here with Nerf Secret Revealed. But still, I've got one last part to go, so please, stick with me. Try your best to be as patient as possible, because I will have more episodes coming up later, but if you want to see more, go down to my channel. Make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.